As the Money Burns is an original podcast by Nikki Woodard. Based on historical research, this is a deep exploration into what happened to a set of actual heirs and heiresses to some of America's most famous fortunes when the Great Depression hits. Each episode has 3 primary sections. Section 1 is a narrative story. Section 2 goes deeper into the historical facts. Section 3 focuses on contemporary, emotional, and personal connections. Story recap. Injured tennis star Frank Shield charms the Queen at Wimbledon, but heir Neil Vanderbilt finds himself in continual hot water with multiple people. Now back to As the Money Burns. Lovers leap. Secret newlyweds arrive at their tropical destination. Will this be the beginning or the end of their clandestine union? Please note this episode contains details of a suicide. Section 1. Story. July 2nd, 1931 at 9 a.m., Honolulu, Hawaii. Army aviators streak across the bright blue sky over the Pacific Ocean. They twist and flip in aerial feats celebrating the arrival of the Matson ocean liner Malolo, bringing 255 passengers from the mainland. When the ship docks, more fanfare greets the arrivals. The prominent guest to which the aerial acrobatics are paid is the National President of the American Legion, Mrs. Robert Lincoln Hoyle. She is greeted by Harold Hill, commander of the Hawaiian Department of the Legion, and who takes her to an afternoon reception. Mrs. Hoyle is here on a 5-day vacation. Other prominent people deboard, including fading silent star Norma Talmadge and newlyweds and acting couple Mr. William Powell and his new Mrs. Carole Lombard, along with members of the Los Angeles Athletic Club swimming team, including 1928 Olympian bronze medalist Clarence Buster Crabbe, the future silver screen serial hero and star of Tarzan, Buck Rogers, and Flash Gordon. With a little less notice, one of the most important heirs of the time, babyface richest boy Huntington Hartford, walks down the plank, his sense of adventure smushed by his smothering mother Henrietta Hartford, clinging next to him, while his secret wife and Lesley College student Mary Lee Epling follow separately a little further behind them. Henrietta is hoping to distract from the secret newlywed couple by having other young companions in their party. Also accompanying them is redheaded teenager Mary Booker, Henrietta's niece and Huntington's cousin, and teenage John NM Howells, son of the famous architect John Mead Howells, and another of Huntington's St. Paul's and Harvard classmates. Since leaving Boston onward, Henrietta has been pleading, cajoling, hysterically crying, begging, and whatever else she can try to convince the young couple to annul their marriage. Mary Lee's parents are in agreement, though not willing to do the foremost and upfront dirty work. Yeah, what a great way to keep apart 2 impressionable, possibly horny young lovers who are actually married. Take them on a tropical island adventure, upping the adrenaline, and expect them to not want to stay together. For someone of limited means, the trip alone would be reason to stick out and try at marriage. For the person of means, the trip only makes him look better. A fantasy trip come true would only work the stated agenda if it turned out to be a nightmare. Lost luggage, rained out days, food poisoning, bickering over plans. No such luck. No beautiful, exotic, tropical Hawaii. Henrietta has her hands full trying to keep the 2 lovers from further consummating their union until their brains fall out. Along the black sand beach, the young swimming party heads out to play in the surf. Cousin Mary collects several of the beautiful seashells. Mary Lee sketches in her book. Nothing how one could imagine with black and white photographs or the 35mm newsreels. Even colored drawings and paintings fail to capture the magnificence of this place. The colors are all so vivid. The waterfalls, the sights, the sounds. Walking in the markets where locals offer coconuts and parrots mingle with tourists. With colossal, outsized, fragrant fruits and flowers everywhere, the East Coast hothouses can't compete. In the distant background, volcanoes remind of constant danger. Off one cliff's edge, they watch a school of dolphins playing in the surf and waves as the breeze rustles their hair. Everything stimulates the senses. Huntington holds Mary Lee's hand, confirming their commitment as they debate cliff diving. Looking out into the sunset, they affirm they are both ready and willing, though opt against leaping at this particular moment into the water below. Exactly how does Henrietta think she's going to break up the young lovers here? At meals, Henrietta won't allow them to sit next to each other, preventing any under-the-table hanky-panky. The overly vigilant mother makes sure to cut Huntington's meat and food to the proper, digestible sizes. In public, he tries to maneuver away from her and the embarrassment. In private, he thinks nothing of it. But now, he has witnesses. Whenever Henrietta turns her head or steps away, the couple slips away for a quick romantic interlude. A kiss, a cuddle, a little something more, sneaking into the other's hotel room at night. They are married, after all. Unable to thwart the young lover's desires in this tropical paradise, Henrietta hopes for more sway on the second part of their trip through the Canadian Rockies. At least, she has succeeded in averting any negative press so far, and thus still has hope. She opens a newspaper to see the others' comings and goings. Back in Europe, life isn't as romantic per se, but the press has plenty to report. Chubby budding fashionista and heiress Barbara Hutton travels with her parents from Rome back to the beaches in Biarritz with a royal admirer in tow. The newly Buckingham-approved debutante failed to catch the Prince of Wales' heart, and instead caught another's from a long line of royalty dating back to 1330, including Pope Clement IX. After meeting through Countess Dorothy di Frasso, Italian Prince Jerome Rospigliosi-Gioeni ardently pursues Barbara across Rome, Venice, and now Biarritz. Prince Jerome previously attempted to woo her cousin Eleanor Hutton, daughter of Marjorie Merriweather Post Hutton and stepdaughter of E.F. Hutton. Instead, Eleanor eloped with Preston Sturgis. Despite romantic proclivities, Barbara proves immune to the Italian prince, possibly still heartbroken over her Broadway playboy Phil Plant, who nurses his own broken heart in India. But soon the press focuses on a situation more grand and sensational. In Paris, another newlywed finds life more difficult. On May 14, 1931, the day before Louise Van Allen married Prince Alexis Divani, 19-year-old Princess Anna Obolensky marries 24-year-old Russian Prince Sergei Trubetzkoy, or the more Russian pronunciation, Sergei Grigorievich Troubetzkoy, in a small civil ceremony in New York, where Anna's parents migrated since the Russian Revolution. The couple then headed to Europe for a more elaborate church ceremony near Paris in August. Anna's father, Prince Alexis Obolensky, is cousin to Russian Prince Serge Obolensky, the charming husband of Ava Astor and brother-in-law to Vincent Astor and Jakey Astor. Like other dispossessed royalty, both the Obolensky and the Troubetzkoy heirs have almost nothing of their former Russian noble possessions abandoned in their escapes from the Bolsheviks. In the former Imperial Russia, the Obolensky and the Troubetzkoy are two of the longest royal lineages, extremely wealthy and perpetually marry each other. Post-revolution, only Prince Serge Obolensky marries into fabulous wealth, providing a semi-equivalent lifestyle. In contrast, his cousin, Prince Alexis Obolensky, teaches singing lessons at his Sutton Place home, making him a close neighbor of society hostess and coloratura soprano opera singer Kobina Wright. Prince Alexis Obolensky himself is a baritone who has performed 7 concerts in the United States and serves as a teacher at the Denmark School of Music, the future Juilliard. Tuesday, July 14th, 1931, Paris. At the Eiffel Tower, the more recent sullen Princess Anna Obolensky visits the site with her cousin Natalie Pissaress to see the activities for Bastille Day. On the top platform, when Natalie gets distracted to one side, Anna suddenly jumps over the 4-foot barrier and leaps, falling to her death, hitting the side of the sharp metal structure and landing into smashed pieces on the ground. Princess Anna's family insists the death is caused by vertigo or an accidental slip. However, she left behind suicide notes in her purse. It seems the unhappy newlywed was forced into marriage and denied her one true love, Count Peter Tolstoy, grandson of Leo Tolstoy, author of Anna Karenina who infuriated the Russian noble families 5 decades earlier, leading to the perpetual forbidding of any romantic alliances between Tolstoys and either Obolenskys or Troubetzkoys. Alas, not all lovers' leaps are safe or lead to happy endings. Section 2, History and Historiography. Every time I recognize a repetitive name, and sometimes a completely new name, though too familiar, such as sharing a famous last name, I find myself going down a rabbit hole leading to a spiral of discovery. I want to see what new avenues or insights this might open up. Often these familiar names recur in multiple other stories and link together through space and time and back to each other. This ongoing curiosity has yielded several very delightful storylines, the largest relating to Cobina Wright, Jakey Astor, Huntington Hartford, and Frank Shields. I know it might feel a little convoluted, but trust me, I add and highlight ones that provide connection, a further illustration of how their world works, and even future hints related to the main characters, their journey, situation, associates, and more so how they perceive or why they made those choices. It is also why the wealthy are so useful in reconstructing this period, their heightened public associations. Today we have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and social media to help link people together and by potential degrees of association. But here I can reconstruct a past and know if there might be a little more to a name mentioned in passing. This time the searches have been a little more complicated as the names are far too common to yield easier results. Yet these searches definitely did bear interesting fruit. Ironically, the names in these intersecting stories often relate to cousins of the main heirs and heiresses. So let me elaborate further on each. For this pseudo-honeymoon in Hawaii, I want to clarify who is Mary Booker and John NM Howells for better context. Both discovered by mention in newspaper articles, but not in Huntington Hartford's biography, Squandered Fortune, which only gave the trip 3 sentences on Henrietta's failed intentions and only the location of Hawaii and not the Canadian Rockies, which the latter was mentioned in period news articles. In only 1 of 3 newspaper articles, Mary Booker and John Howells are mentioned to be directly in the Hartford party, along with Mary Lee Epling, though another article inferred the grouping. Both are mentioned in 2 other articles along with other passengers on the Malolo or visitors along but separate from Henrietta, Huntington, and Mary Lee. Thus, I wanted to clarify the age and relative perspective relationships of these 2 traveling companions, because that would help reconstruct other elements. Are they older? Younger? Obviously privy to the secret marriage, how might they fit into Henrietta's goal of breaking up Huntington and Mary Lee? With so little to start and names so common, it took a lot of sorting. Alternate Mary Bookers include several married women, a young 8 to 10-year-old girl who hosted a swimming party in Macon, Georgia, and 2 African-American females, one of whom was arrested for selling and making bootleg liquor in Ohio, and another a young girl who died in a drowning accident off a Florida beach. But the Mary Booker in question is from Charleston, South Carolina, as indicated in a later September 1931 article when she is again mentioned as a guest of Henrietta Hartford, and revealed in a 1933 article as Henrietta's niece, for whom the aunt will host a debutante ball at Newport Sea Verge in 1932. Similarly, I had to go through a circular path to sort out similar namesakes, as is tradition amongst families to repeat or barely alter names amongst the generations. As first noted in the party, John M. Howells of Maine might be the famous architect with his son William White Howells. Further investigation reveals that a John N.M. Howells is a Harvard student from the Kittery Point, Maine area who receives a Harvard scholarship in 1933. Now backtracking the 2 names, the architect and his family summer in Kittery Point, Maine, and has another son, John N.M., who is at several parties and events with his father, including whale watching in Maine and a lobby opening in New York. The elder and younger Johns would both be the kind of people Huntington might admire. By the way, NM are the initials for Noyes Mead. The father architect John Mead Howells focuses his designs in the Art Deco style of office buildings. His works include in Chicago the Tribune Tower and in New York the American Radiator Building, Daily News Building, and Beekman Tower. His father, the grandfather patriarch, William Dean Howells, is an editor and publisher, contemporary and associate with Mark Twain, Henry James, Nathaniel Hawthorne, Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, Henrik Ibsen, Emile Zola, Emily Dickinson, and Stephen Crane. William Dean Howells is also inspired by the ideas of Leo Tolstoy. Grandson's son and older brother, William White Howells, serves as an anthropology professor at Harvard. The Rospigliosi family dates back to the 1330s and includes at least one pope, Clement IX. However, tracking down Prince Jerome Rospigliosi is difficult. Brief references to an African safari with his cousin in 1928, much later escorting his aunt to a 1936 function, and randomly a reference to a future wife, Marian Snowden, and their quick Mexican divorce without further distinguishing characteristics. There are no Wikipedia pages nor genealogy sites listing Prince Jerome. The very scant prior references might have been partially related to his parents' problematic and marital history. However, my OCD persistently checking again just prior to recording, I uncover a minor New York heiress, Marian Snowden, and her brief marriage to Geronimo Rospigliosi. Now, plenty of articles later in 1931, a bigger trail, but not enough time to sort, and definitely will be mired in spellings and confusions on that one. But I have found our prince. Nonetheless, his American mother, Mary Reid, is one of the American dollar princesses, married to Colonel Frederick H. Parkhurst, whom she divorced, then quickly married Prince Joseph Guiseppe Rospigliosi-Gioeni. Their marriage is not considered legitimate in the eyes of the Roman Catholic Church due to her divorce. This became an issue with the firstborn daughter not getting properly baptized, and is not corrected by the second birth of son Prince Jerome in 1907. The matter is only rectified on the 1913 deathbed of Prince Joseph Rospigliosi. However, the aftermath meant, a lot of the time, the family, especially the mother, is ignored in proper society. Also, the mother's name, Mary, sometimes spelled as Marie, is Italianized into Maria Rospigliosi. It's a nightmare that goes down endless spirals without much clarification. Mary Reid's marriage is listed as one of 29 princesses of American descent in a 1909 article, which I will make available via social media, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Like the Italian royals above, the complication in tracking down Russian royal and noble names can be just as much, if not more, problematic. Lapses in records, changes or variances in spelling, especially with a hybridization related to a new location or language. Russian names turned Italian or French, or multiple spellings for pronunciations and different alphabets. Case in point, the girlfriend cousin at the Eiffel Tower. There are several spellings. Natalie Pissaress, Pissaress, Pissarres, Natalia Pissaress, Natasha Pissaress. Various searches and names also lead nowhere. I even attempted to see if there might be an association with the famous Impressionist painter Camille Pissarro. Blame a recent visit to the immersive Monet exhibit for that hope. As for the Obolensky Troubetzkoy and Tolstoy, there is an overabundance of names and effort to clarify who might be whom. As discussed in previous episodes, World War I overall and the Russian Revolution in particular left many former noble and royal families dispossessed and floating about in 1920s Europe. In 1919, Leo Tolstoy's second son, Ilya Tolstoy, fled to Paris with his family and young son, Peter Tolstoy. Also in Paris, several other noble families, including the Obolensky and Troubetzkoy, also relocate there. As young children, Anna met and fell for Peter. Despite the new lives, old grudges remain. Their growing affection upset Anna's family, who relocated again to New York, where her father became a singer and teacher. Peter Tolstoy does not get much mention except later when helping his aunt, Countess Alexandra Tolstoy, raise money for communist refugees in New York in 1960. Princess Anna's younger sister, Princess Luba Obolensky, did not have the same objections and actually had been in love with her cousin, Sergei Troubetzkoy, as a young girl, as indicated in Luba's early journals and diaries. And 2 years later, in 1933, Luba will marry Sergei, and they will have a long and happy marriage until her death in 1991. In most sources on the couple, they do not mention her sister, the earlier marriage, nor the death-suicide. The mention is only made in the 1933 marital announcements. By the way, Anna and Luba's mother is also a Troubetzkoy. An additional side note. The Eiffel Tower is the first structure to pass for 200 feet and 300 feet in height and is the tallest man-made structure in the world, surpassing the Washington Monument from 1889 for 41 years until 1930, losing to the Chrysler Building. In 1931, increased security for more railing is added to the already 4 feet to prevent future suicide attempts. To a female vendor, one thwarted jumper mentioned the disappointment at the assured success of execution, unlike other more common methods. In 1957, a broadcasting aerial, essentially an antenna of 17 feet, 5.2 meters, was added, thus surpassing the Chrysler Building in height. The Eiffel Tower is the most visited monument in the world, with an entrance fee. These entangled tales of love and money read very much like a Russian novel. Will the fates of our heirs and heiresses have such dark and unhappy endings? Section 3. Contemporary and Personal Relevance. Part of the fun of this podcast series is covering the past, both the pleasures of wealth and its contrasting dark sides, from trips to Hawaii to the depths of despair in Paris. All this feels even more relevant to our own circumstances as the beginning of the Great Reset, another recession-depression era begins. As I learned back at the University of Texas, Austin from U.S. diplomatic historian Robert Devine, that major depressions occur in about roughly 75-year cycles. Before the 1930s, previous times coincide with the U.S. Civil War, and the time before that, the American Revolution, and even the French Revolution. Professor Devine warned, pay attention to the cycles and the nearly major wars per century, too. Now we have other life events like the pandemic, which also have about a century major illness cycle, and this one coincides closely to a major depression, which has a larger almost 500-year cycle. And now the war between Russia and Ukraine causes further economic and social upheaval throughout the world. Aren't we so lucky? So it is surreal to have run across these storylines about past refugees as we head into the darkest part of the Depression, which is considered to be 1932, while simultaneously in 2022 and likely in 2023, many will reach their boiling points around the world. The aftermath of collapses and social upheaval, issues with supply chains, and the discrepancies between the haves and have-nots. No one is immune, even in the better, somewhat safer groups, because dangers will eventually creep over. Recent events in Sri Lanka highlight what can happen when supplies get too low and an economy collapses. The storming of buildings, protests, and physical safety all become major issues. Next year in 2023, when our story reaches 1932, many of our characters fear those exact situations, and some will actually use those threats to cover up what they themselves are hiding, their own prior losses. Can you sense where this is all going? If hindsight is 20/20, can we use the past to predict our current futures? This year, I had the pleasure of meeting the longest ongoing podcaster, Dave Slusher, who was inducted into the Podcast Hall of Fame this year. His podcast, Evil Genius Chronicles, covers a variety of topics as Dave goes through life, details of daily activities, and his forever love of music. In his June 20th, 2022 episode, Active Grimace Face, he features As the Money Burns as one of his favorite new podcasts. You can catch it via all podcast directories, Evil Genius Chronicles, and at his website, evilgeniuschronicles.org. Links available in the notes section. If you enjoy As the Money Burns, then please share, like, and subscribe. Next, when we return to As the Money Burns, as another Hollywood royal marriage implodes, back east, another heir and heiress actually marry under favorable circumstances. Until then. As the Money Burns is an original podcast written, produced, and voiced by Nikki Woodard, based on historical research. Archival music has been provided by Past Perfect Vintage Music. Check out their website at www.pastperfect.com. Please come visit us at As the Money Burns via GoodPods, Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. Transcripts, timeline, episode guide, and character bios are available at asthemoneyburns.com.